Today's shiur begins 15 lines from the top. At the end of the line, you'll see Levi in a trapezoid shape or volcano shape. Before we begin the actual Gemara, let us glance at the side where we see the nosei mivneh, the nosei, the structure, that is the topic heading, and mivneh, the structural note, combined into one. The volcano shape appears. Birur Lama Levi Baruch Hei Rav Asi Baruch Vov Hoisif Birchas Yoitzer Adam. We're going to see the practices of Levi and Rav Asi with regard to the number of brachos that they recited upon the respective weddings that are featured in the Gemara. In our previous sugya, we learned about what we call Sheva Brachas. Sheva Brachas is a term associated with the 7 brachas that are recited at the point of Nisuan under the chuppah. Truth is that there are really 6 brachas plus a bracha on the wine. So we can refer to the full number of birchas chasanim as being 6 brachos. However, we see that Levi said 5 and Rav Asi said 6, adding the bracha of Yotzer Ha'adam. The note continues, Machloikis kama yitziros have bebrias ha'adam. We're going to be exposed to a controversy regarding how many acts of creation, of formation, were there in the creation of man. We speak about man and woman. We should bear that in mind. And a second point that will be featured in the Gemara is basar machshava or basar maisa. We'll see that there was an intent to do one thing, and when it came to actually carrying things out, something else was done. All in terms of the creation of man. So now we turn to the Gemara. Levi ikla lebei Rebbe. Levi went to the house of Rebbe Behilulei to Rebbe Shimon Bray on the occasion of the wedding of Rebbe Shimon, Rebbe's son. Baruch Chomesh, and he recited 5 brachos. Rashi lists them on the second wide line under the Gemara. The bracha number 1, Shehakol. Number 3, in other words, he didn't say bracha number 2, that we're referring to numbers that we used in our previous shiur. You can see on the top line of the Gemara, the number 2, that's the bracha of Yotzer Adam. So you see, he didn't say that. And number 3, he said Asher Yotzar, and 4, Sois Tosis, 5, Sameach Tesamach, and what we listed above is bracha number 6, Asher Bora, but he skipped 2, so you have a total of 5 brachas. We continue in the Gemara. Rav Asi iklo lebei Rav Ashi b'hilulei demor brei. Rav Asi went to the home of Rav Ashi on the occasion of Mor Brei Rav Ashi's wedding. Baruch Shis, and he said all 6 brachas. He added Yotzer Ha'adam. Lema b'hal komifli. Should we say that the difference between Levi and Rav Asi is that they're arguing on the following point. The more savar chada yitzira havoi, in the creation of man and woman. So there was one act of creation, which means that man and woman were created simultaneously. They were, in fact, we might call them co-joined twins. They were 2 entities that were stuck together back to back. That's called the Shita of base partsufim, 2 faces. But it was one act of creation in which male and female were created. Umorsavar, Rav Asi, who added a bracha, is because he is of the opinion Shtei Yitziros Havoi. There were 2 stages of creation. First, male was created with a tail, and then that tail was formed into a woman. So you have a 2-stage creation when it comes to the issue of male-female. So should we say that this is the point of difference? That in terms of brachas dedicated to formation of man, the Shita, Levi in this case, that said 5 brachas, is because you only need 1 as opposed to 2 brachas that commemorate the creation of man. And the second sheet, Rav Asi, who said that there's a total of 6 brachas, meaning he would have 2 brachas in honor of the creation of man. In other words, brachas 2 and 3 are because there was a 2-stage creation process. First the male, and then the female. So, should we say that this is their point of machlokes, of controversy? Lo. This is not to say thusly. Everyone is in agreement that in terms of the action, there was one act of creation. The 2 genders, male, female, or Adam and Eve, back to back. Umor sovar, so that everyone's in agreement in terms of stages of creation. There was one creation where both genders appeared. What about the 5 and 6 issue? Mor sovar boser machshavas linon. Ravasi, who says that you'll have a total of 6 brachas that need to be recited, is because he goes according to the original thought. The original thought was to have, we'll say, a 2-stage creation. That's the machshava. And more sovar boser maisas linan. Levi says we don't look at what the original thought was, but rather what actually happened. And as we said before, there was one yitzira, one formation. Male, female were co-joined, and then later simply separated. This idea of machshava and maisa is reflected in the following. Kiha de Rav Yehuda Rami. Rav Yehuda raises a contradiction, if you will, an inconsistency. Ksiv, one pasuk says, Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam b'tzalmoi. That indicates, in terms of grammar, you have a singular creation. One. And Uksiv Zahar Unikeva Bora'am. This pasuk is clear as referring to 2 were created. The male and female were created. So, in the first pasuk cited here, just man was created. The male. The second pasuk says male and female were created. Ha-ketzad. How do you resolve these 2 psukim? Betchila ola b'machshava livrois shnayim. The original intention was to create 2. Now, the Marsha adds, which we didn't mention before, but the original intention was to create 2 separate bodies. Ulbasof nivra echad. And at the end, one body with 2 faces, the co-joined entity, was created. So that you see that the resolution of these 2 psukim is based on what the original thought was, the machshava, and then the maisa. And that was the idea that we used in explaining the difference between Levi and Ravasi. What is to be emphasized, the machshava or versus the maisa? Rav Ashi iklo lebei Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi visited the house of Rav Kahana. Yumo Kama Borach Kulhu. And of course, this was on the occasion of a wedding. On the first day, so they said all of the brachas. Mikan ve'elech. After the wedding day, after, we'll say, the chuppah day, the subsequent days, I'ika ponim chadoshois borach kulu, if someone new showed up that hadn't been there on the previous day, so they would say all of the brachas. V'ilo, if they had a situation that no new people showed up on the subsequent day, afushi simcha bi'almahu, the fact that they're celebrating is simply added simcha, but it's not a high enough level of simcha to require all of the brachas to be recited. Therefore, mevorech shasimcha b'ma'onoi va'asher bora. Simcha b'ma'ono is part of the Birchas Hamazon, the introductory section of the Birchas Hamazon, and only one of the 6 brachas that we refer to as the Sheva brachas, the bracha number 6, Asher Bora. that Asher Bora is a bracha that is recited on every day of the week of wedding festivity, even if you're not going to be reciting the other brachas. This is a point that we saw in our previous year when we studied the Rashi on the topic. Before we go further in the Gemara, on the side, you notice we have a nosei mivne heading. In our Gemara itself, we're going to be using a diamond numbering system with Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. And in our note, we indicate Hazmanim Shebohem Oimrim Bazimun Shesimcha Ba'ono. The different times surrounding the wedding, during which we would add Shasimcha B'Ma'ono in the Birchas Hamazon. Mishiva, now we go back to the Gemara. Mishiva Vi'ad Shloshim. If you're, let's say, participatory in a meal in a house where a couple got married recently, so from day 7 till day 30, Bein Omar Lohu Machma Silula, whether the people that were invited were told, come and feast with us because of the wedding, Bein Lo Omar Lohu Machma Silula, or even if they weren't said, we're inviting you because of the recent wedding, Mevorech Shasimcha B'Ma'oinai. That bracha, nevertheless, that tefillah is added into the Birchas Hamazon. Shasimcha B'Mono, that there is joy in his dwelling. So that this bracha is felt by the Gemara to be appropriate up till 30 days, even if you're not invited to participate in that particular, in the meal by your host because of the wedding that he made. Mikan v'elech, from the 30-day mark on. If the host invited you and said, listen, 2 months ago I made a wedding, so I want you to join with me in a meal. So if he tells you that I'm inviting you because of the wedding that I recently made, so you say Shasim Hamona. V'ilo, if he doesn't say that, lo, then it's not going to be recited because it's more than 30 days since the wedding. V'chi omar le machmas hilula ademas. The last point we said was that beyond 30 days, if he does tell you that you're invited because I made a recent wedding, so you say Shasim Chabono, but that's very nice, but until when? Ad emas, until how long? Omar Rav Papi Mishmei de Rava, Ad Tresi Yarchishasa, up till 12 months. So that it's an invite where it's specified that wants you to come over to have a festive meal because of the wedding I recently made. You will add Shasimcha B'mono for a period of up till 12 months. Umeikara meimas, and from before. Meikara means from the outset, namely from even before the nisuin, the chuppah. There is a build-up of festivity in anticipation of the consummation of the marriage. So from the outset, what are the guidelines for reciting Shasimcha B'Ma'ono? Omar Rav Papa, Mechirami Sairi Ba'asinta. Sairi is a reference to barley, Sa'oirim. Ba'asinta is the name of the vessel in which beer is made. So from the point that the family starts to prepare beer needs time to ferment, and they're preparing this beer in order to serve at the chuppah, at the consummation wedding canopy ceremony. So from that point in time that they start the beer preparation, the Simcha B'Mono bracha is appropriate. The Gemara asks but we want to add that from that point you would say Shesum B'Mono, but not from the earlier time namely the Erusin, where they initially bonded, where the man gives the woman money or something of financial value to the woman in exchange for agreeing to marry him. That's Erusin. So Rav Papa says that the time from which Sha'asimcha b'ma'oinoi would be added is from the time they start making the beer for the chuppah, but not further back in time from the time of the Erusin. The Gemara asks, Eini, is that really so? Rav Papa. And it's again the same name. We're dealing with Rav Papa. Iasik la'abo mor brei u'borach mishas Erusin. Rav Papa was preparing the wedding for his son. His son's name was Abba. Abba was a name that you see in the Shas. That's what he called his son. In fact, it's a name that in some circles you see even to this day. So we see that Rav Papa himself was saying Shas Simcha B'mono from the time of Erusin. So the Gemara says, Shiny Rav Papa. Rav Papa himself was different. Dahavi Toriach Lei. He already had the beer made. In fact, Rav Papa was known in the Shas as a beer manufacturer. And Rashi adds not just the beer, but all the chuppah and meal needs were prepared from a while before, so that the Romi Sairi Basinta would not be a time standard for him. The Gemara continues, Ravina Yasik Le Librei Bei Rav Chaviva. Here Rashi says Yasik Livrei means he was matching his son, with a woman, setting up what we call a shidduch. He was introducing him to a woman in the home of Rav Chaviva, Uborach Mishas Erusin, and he said Shasimcha Mono from the time of Erusin, from the time of the initial act of marriage. Omar, and he said, I can say this bracha, which indicates rejoicing from this early time. Kinli b'gavayo delo hadri b'hu. I know this couple, my son and the girl. They're not going to back out. So we can start the acknowledgement of rejoicing already from this early stage. Lo istaya milsa v'hadri b'hu. Things didn't work out, and in fact they backed out. The father of the girl's family didn't want to give her over to them. Rav Tachlifa bar Marova iklo leBovel. Rav Tachlifa went to visit Bovel. Bar Marova might very well mean that he was. That's not his father's name, but rather he was a resident of the land of Israel. And Rav Tachlifa went from Israel to Bovel. Borach Shis Arichta. He said all 6 brachas on the occasion of a wedding, of a chuppah, and he added to the brachas number 1 and 2 an opening, and in addition to the opening, a closing bracha as well. Arichta means an elongated bracha. But for our purposes, it really means that in addition to the opening, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, there was also a closing bracha. As far as that explanation, by the way, is what you can see in Rashi. Shis Arichta Hoisif Dvorem Al Shahakol. That's bracha number 1. The Al Birchas Yitzira Rishona, the first Yitzira bracha of Yotzira Adam. He added v'chosam b'hem bebaruch. He had a closing bracha for them, so that in addition to the other 4 brachas all having closing brachas, he added closing brachas to brachas number 1 and 2. The less hilchuso kavosei, the Gemara says, but we do not rule like him, and that therefore bracha of shakol borol chvoidoi and yotzer adam, those are only the singular brachas without a closing bracha. Rav Chaviva ikla lebei Mehula, Rav Chaviva went to a meal of a circumcision. It means a sudas mila, a meal because a bris mila took place. Baruch, and he said, it's part of the Birchas Hamazon, Shasimcha b'moinoi. V'les hilchasa kavasei, that is not to be followed. Mishum de tridi, the is leitzara le'anuka. To describe a bris milah meal as a high enough level of rejoicing to legitimatize this bracha, the recitation of this bracha in a bris milah is unfounded. And why is that? Because the child just went through a painful procedure. And treating means the people, especially the parents, are preoccupied with the child's tsar, with the pain of the child. And therefore, Simcha Bono is not appropriate for a bris milah meal. On the side of the Gemara, we have a topic heading, Chasonim min haminyan vein avelim min haminyan. For various brachas, we have an expectation, a requirement of having 10 people present. In the case of the wedding brachas, you have 10 people, and the groom can be counted as one of the 10. There's special brachas that the Gemara will share with us later on what the text is, that are called Birchas Avelim. That these are brachas that are recited on the occasion of being in the house of mourning. And those brachas also necessitate the presence of 10 before they can be recited. And in counting the 10, you do not count the mourners as part of the 10. So that you need, in addition to the mourners, you need 10 other people, only after which you could say the Birchas Avelim. And we said that the text of the Birchas Avelim, this will be revealed later in the Gemara. Note also the mivneh, the structural note, a crown shape appears. And we've noted Havlotas Rav Yehonasan. We've highlighted the names Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Mabat Rishon, at first glance, nearish Devreim Doimim. It appears that what they're saying is similar. Avol Yesh Layin B'Toisvis Dibro Masel Rav Levarer Im Ochein Kain Hadover. To clarify whether they're really saying the same thing, that you would have to investigate further by looking in the Tosfos Dibur Masel Rav Tanu Polig. Now the Gemara. Omer of Nachman Omer Rav Chasanim min haminyan v'ein avelim min haminyan. That when counting the necessary 10 males that are needed for the recitation of the brachas, the chasan, the groom, counts as part of the 10, but in the case of mourners, the mourners do not. Meisvei chasanim v'avelim min haminyan. Well, here we have a Tanaic source that indicates that the avelim are also part of the number. That's a problem then for Rav. The Gemara responds, Masnisa karomis alei de Rav, are you raising an objection to Rav from a Brisa source? Rav Tana hu upolig. Rav has the authority of a Tana, and hence he can argue with the Brisa. So Rav's opinion is Avelim don't count as part of the 10, and the Brisa says they do. Itmar, Omar Rav Yitzchok, Om Rav Yochanan, Chasanim min haminyan, v'ein Avelim min haminyan. As we said before, it would seem at first glance that he's saying the same thing as Rav. As we said, that the Tosfos analyzes, is that really the case? But for our purposes, Rabbi Yochanan makes the same distinction that Rav made. Chasanim do count toward the 10, and the Avelim do not. Meisvei, and we raise an objection, Chasanim ve'Avelim min haminyan. And it's important to note that Rabbi Yochanan was not on the same level of authority as Rav is concerned when dealing with, let's say, confronting brises. So here the Gemara is not going to tell you, like we said regarding Rav, that he's a Tana and he can argue. Rather, the Gemara attempts to resolve Rabbi Yochanan's statement with this Tanaic source. We continue at the top of Omid Beis. Ki Tanyo Hahi, the source that says the Ovel is Min HaMinyan, that is Bebirchas HaMozen. Ki Koma Rabbi Yochanan Beshura. The Ovel counts toward the minyan, that is to create a group of 3 that enables the Zimun, the special introductory passage, to be said before the Birchas HaMazon. In order to recite the Zimun passage, you need to have 3 people that ate together. So if you have 2 people and the Ovel and the mourner was with them, then Zimun can be recited. So with regard to Zimun, the introductory part of the Birchas HaMazon, which also has a number requirement, namely 3, the Ovel counts. The statement of Rabbi Yochanan that the Ovel does not count, that's with regard to something called shura. Shura literally is a row. If we look at Rashi on the second line from the top, Shura, when the people return from the burial of a deceased, there would be a row of people that formed around the mourner, linachamo, to console him. Umoshiven oisoi, the ovel is sat down. Vehein oindim saviv, and the others, the friends, stand around him. Ein shura pachos me'asra. That process of telling the Ovel to sit down and the others coming to stand around him and console him in that fashion, this is only if you have 10 consolers. And in that context, the Ovel doesn't count as part of the 10. We'll say the beneficiary of their consolation, but you've got to have 10 consolers. Hence, regarding Shura, the Ovel doesn't count as part of the 10. As we continue in the Gemara, we glance at the side where we have a Nosei Mivneh heading, a double underline is featured. And we note that this is Havlotas, an attempt to highlight Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Rabbi Yochanan, the Hesper Dinov, and explain laws that he teaches, Be'inyin Birchas Avelim u Birchas Chasanim. With regard to these topics of the Brocha of Avelim, whose text we haven't seen yet, and the Birchas Chasanim, the brachas that we say on the occasion of the Chuppah. The Gemara. The Gemara continues now on the second line from the top with a question that takes a few lines to develop. In light of that which we got finished saying, we ask, Ve'alahod Yom Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Rabbi Yochanan Mevorchen Birchas Chasanim Ba'asora V'Chasanim Min HaMinyan. We recite the Birchas Chasanim in the presence of 10, and the Chasan counts as one of the 10. Birchas Avelim Ba'asora V'Ein Avelim Min HaMinyan. The Birchas Avelim is recited in the presence of 10, but the Avelim do not count as part of the 10. Now, we mentioned the need for 10, and that the Ovel doesn't count as one of them. That we mentioned the context of the Shura, of the row of consolers that are present upon the return from a burial. So, this idea of Avelim Eino Min HaMinyan, we explained that was true with regard to the Shura. Here we have Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan telling us about a case where Avelim are not Min HaMinyan, they're not part of the 10 required. But here there's an added word, Birchas Avelim. Bracha B'Shura Mi'ika. Do you have, on the occasion of their consoling him, do you have a bracha recited there, B'Shura? The bracha we have, assumed along the way is talking about a bracha that's associated with a meal. Do you have a bracha outdoors there in the shura? The expression mi ika is highlighted with a diamond, and as you'll see that the structure, the style of the questions is similar as we go along. Ella ki ka'omar Rabbi Yochanan berachba. When Rabbi Yochanan made reference to the chasanim, that the brichas avela ba'asor ve'en avela min haminyan, that's a reference to the rachba. Rachba literally is a square. It's an outdoor area. This is on the occasion that the mourners eat their first meal. The first meal that the mourners eat is prepared by others. They don't eat from their own food. And when they prepared this meal and served the meal, they served it in the rachba. And there, the Birchas Avelim was recited. And again, the text will be revealed later in the Gemara. And as part of that meal, you would have to have 10 people in order to justify the recitation of the Birchas Avelim. And that took place at that first meal after the burial. And as we said, the mourners do not count toward the number 10. We continue. Ve'alahod yom Rav Yitzchak Rav Yochanan mevorchen birchas chasanim ba'asora kol shiva v'chasan min haminyan o birchas avelim ba'asora kol shiva v'ein avelim min haminyan. It's another statement of Rabbi Yochanan where he again refers to the birchas chasan and birchas avelim, both requiring 10, and he mentions that both are recited over a period of 7 days. For an entire week, these brachas would be recited. A moment ago, we said that the birchas avelim and the 10 was part of the rachba. But the rachba was that first meal that we serve the mourners. And hence the Gemara asks over here, Birchas rachba kol shiva mi'ika? Could that be that you have meals served to the mourners and the recitation of these brachas for a period of 7 days? So the Gemara answers, Mishkachas lo beponim chadoshes. When you have new people that had not been there to console the avelim on the previous day, and the mourners are having their meal, and in this context, I'm not convinced that the subsequent meals are provided by the community, because the concept of the mourner not eating from his own food, Rashi pointed out, that's with regard to the Suda Rishona, the first meal. But that's already a separate point that needs further clarification. But for our purposes, the mourner and the meals that he eats, if on the subsequent days there are new people that show up, so that will be the basis of reciting the Birchas Avelim each subsequent day, when new people that were not there on the previous day show up. Now, to illustrate this idea of ponim chadoshes, as well as the text of the Birchas Avelim, this is what will preoccupy the Gemara for the most part, for the rest of most of this Omid. In fact, you can see we have a long marking called a Maisa on the side of our Gemara under the Nosei Mivneh heading. A triangle appears, and a squiggle underline also appears. Sidra Shel Devarim is a series of things, 1 Aleph and Beis, Ubrachos, 2 through 5. shene'emru b'mizgeres nichum avelim. These brachos are recited in the context of the consolation. She'orach Reish Lakish im miturgimone eitz Reb Chia bar Abba sheniftar lo beno. In the Gemara, we're going to see a story where the son of Reb Chia bar Abba passed away. A tragic story where a father buried his son. So Reb Chia ends up being a mourner, and Reish Lakish, we'll see in the story, consoles him. Now the Gemara. Kiha de Reb Chia bar Abba makri bonei de Reish Lakish have. Reb Chia bar Abba was the tutor of Reish Lakish's son. The Amri law, another version, is instead of makri means he would teach him Chumash, or teach him psukim, verses from the written Torah. Another version, the Amri law, means another version, Masni Brei de Reish Lakish Havi. He was a tutor of Reish Lakish's son for the study of Mishnayos. Shochiv le Yenuka. Shochiv means to die. Yenuka is a child. So Rav Chia bar Abba's child died. Yuma kama lo Ozer legabe. The first day, Reish Lakish did not go. L'machar, the next day, Dabre liYehuda bar Nachmani miturgimone. Reish Lakish led along with him his miturgimon. This miturgimon is a person whose role is to enable the tzibur, the public, to hear the drosha, the lecture of a particular Rav. The Rav would speak softly to the Meturgamon. He functioned as a human PA system. So Reish Lakish did not go to the house of mourning on the first day. Rather, he came on the second day. And it seems to me that this is pretty much the point of the Gemara, illustrating this idea of he represented the Ponim Chadoshes on the second day. And he went along with Yehuda bar Nachmani. Omar lei, kum emo milsa kol kobil Yenuka. Say something. Reish Lakish instructs Yehuda bar Nachmani, say something regarding the death of the child. And remember, in our introduction, we featured triangle number 1, Aleph and Beis. These are not brachos. Brachos will figure when we get to triangle number 2 through 5. But say some words, we'll say, regarding the death of the child. Pasach v'yomar vayar Hashem vayinotz mikas bono v'vnoisav. The Almighty saw and was upset because of the wrath caused by his sons and daughters. Dor she'avos menatzim l'kosh baruch hu, the generation in which the avos are menaitz, they infuriate, the fathers infuriate the Almighty. Kayes al b'neim v'al b'noisem, the Almighty takes out His wrath, so to speak, on the children of those that infuriated Him. Umeising shem ktanim, and they die when they're still children, when they're still very young. V'ika the Amri bochor hava, another version, and notice we have a dashed underline. If you compare this with the previous dashed underline, the Aleph version, this is the Iko de Amri, the second version, has it has as the death not a child but a young man, a young adult, a bochor. V'hachi ka'omar lei, and thusly Yehuda bar Nachmani said to Reb Chia bar Abba. There's a pasuk that is long. We have a long marking for this. He says the following pasuk: Al kein al bachurav lo yismach Hashem v'es yisoymo v'es almanoisav lo yirachim. The pasuk describes the Almighty not being joyful over the young men, and the orphans and widows described in the pasuk, Hashem will show no mercy. Kikulo chonef umeira, the entire generation is one of false flattery. V'chol peh doiver nevola, and each mouth utters foulness. B'chol zois lo yishav apoi v'oid yado netuya. And with all of this, the Almighty wrath is not assuaged, and His hand is still outstretched. What do you mean by that? And here we have a long answer. Omar Rav Chonon Ba'arav Hakol Yodim Kala Lamu Nichnesa L'chuppah. Everyone knows why a bride stands under a marriage canopy. In other words, everyone knows what their next experience is going to be after the marriage canopy, so the couple go off and experience their first act of intimacy. The message in this pasuk is that people who speak about those kind of matters, call them the private matters that demand modesty, and people who speak about them and utter words of foulness, even if someone was the beneficiary of a heavenly ruling of 70 good years, nepach olav l'ra, because of speaking foulness, that can all be reversed. We all turn to evil, to punishment. So you have Yehuda Bar Nachmani visiting the house of a mourner who just lost his son, and this is what you hear him telling the bereaved father. As far as the pshat that we just said in regarding the phrase of the oid yado netuya, and what that was a reference to someone who is foul in his speech, and the gzar din of 70 good years could be overturned. So Rashi says, Shel Shivim Shana, V'oid Dorish, the word V'od, Yado Netuya, is explained Kamo Voed, Oilomoy Shaladam, Voed meaning the life of a person. And the life of a person, Yemei Shnosem Shivim Shana, the pasuk says elsewhere that a man's life is 70 years. Now, the Netuya, that expression, is Nehefeches Mitoiv L'Ra. It indicates maybe from the word hatoya, to tilt something, to flip something over from good to bad. So v'oid yado netuya, v'od is a reference to the 70 years, and that could be flipped over because of his foulness, which we saw in the pasuk that spoke about v'chol peh doiver nevola. Now, in simple terms, you have a bereaved father, and you have Yehuda Bar Nachmani telling him, people die young because God is angry with the behavior of their parents, and God will take away their kids, and or the young man was guilty of foulness. So the Gemara asks, also the Nechumi, he came to console. Suri Komet Sarle. He's saying, if anything, he's saying things that will irritate, that are hurtful. How could that be? Hachi Ka'omar Le. What Yehuda Bar Nachmani was saying to Reb Chia was as follows: Choshiv at la'atfusei adora. You lost your son. It's not because you or your son were guilty of these things, but rather because of your high level of piety, you are viewed as so important in the eyes of heaven that if the society, if the door needed punishment to be meted out to them, the Almighty turns to you, collecting your beloved son, and through that the sins of the generation are expiated. This is a concept that you find in different places. Rashi here makes reference to this idea of when tzaddikim are present in a generation, they can end up paying, so to speak, for the sins of the generation. There's a lot of depth to this concept, which is beyond the scope of Gemara markings, but certainly you would want to look into this further. So the Meturgeman of Reish Lakish wasn't far from irritating Reb Baba. He was actually elevating him to the point, to such a level, or he was describing his elevated status as an explanation of why this befell him. He was the source of atonement for the rest of the generation. Omar Lei Kum Emo Milsa, and again we continue with the story of Reish Lakish telling his Meturgeman, telling Yehuda bar Nachmani, say something Keneged Shvachai Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Say something in honor and praise of the Almighty. And once again, remember the context. We're in the house of mourners. Posach v'Yomar, and he said the following. And here we begin the brachos. We mentioned Birchas Avelim. You'll take note that we have quotation marks. You'll see it's a 3-line quote, at the end of which you'll notice there is a bracha. So that we're dealing here with the brachos that we mentioned before, the Birchas Avelim. So Reish Lakish says to his Meturgeman, say something in honor of the Almighty. Posach v'Yomar. He opened and he said, and Rashi points out, he opens with a bracha. We don't have that in the Gemara text, but it's understood. In other words, he said, Baruch Ato Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. And now the Gemara text. Hakel hagadol b'roiv godlo adir v'chazak b'roiv nerois. The great, the almighty God, the awesome God, Mechayim Mesim b'mamoroi, he is capable of resurrecting the dead through his mere instruction. Oisik dolas arein chekev v'neflos arein mispor. He does wondrous workings, unfathomable and amazing acts that are innumerable. Baruch Ato Hashem Mechayei Hamesim. Omar Lei Kum Emo Milso Keneged Avelim. Say something in honor of the mourners. And again, you'll see here that there is a bracha that's recited here. Posach v'Yomar Achenu Hamiyugoyim Hamadukoyim Be'evel Hazeh. Says brothers, our brothers that are depressed in this particular mourning. Tenu levavchem lachkor ezos. Look into this matter. That the idea here is that eventually everyone dies, and as a result, it's part of nature. And do not cry too much. Don't overdo it. As Rashi says, "Velosivku yoser midai." Zois hi oimedes load. This is something that is permanent. Nesivu misheshis yemei gracious. It's a path from the beginning of time, from the 6 days of creation. Rabim shosu, rabim yishtu. Many have drank from this. Drinking meaning like the elixir of death, and many will drink it. Kamishta rishonim kach mishta achronim. Just like the early generations drank this, so to the later generations will drink this. Achenu bal nechamos yinachem eschem. Achenu, he calls to them, the mourners, my brothers. Bal nechamos, the source of consolation, meaning the Almighty, should console you. Baruch menachem avelim, which is a bracha. Baruch ato Hashem menachem avelim. Blessed be the Almighty, He who comforts the mourners. You'll notice that we have a bracketed section. Following the brackets, you see an additional bracha. We go back to the series of brachas. Within the brackets, there's criticism of Abaye criticizes that which was just said. And with our markings, you can see we have dashed underline just before the bracketed section the expressions Rabbi Mishtu and Kach Mishte Achronim. Omar Abai. We now continue with the bracketed section. I hope everyone sees that there's a bracket length indicator. You can see how long this section is. So Abaye says, Rabim Shasu Lema, that which you said that many have drunk from this, that's okay. Past tense, that's alright. Rabim Yishtu Lo Lema, but to say that the multitudes will drink the elixir of death, it's not proper to say that. Mishta Rishonim Lema, that this is the drinking of the previous ones, the first ones, that you can say. Mishta Achronim Lo Lema, but making reference to the later generations will drink the elixir of death, that you shouldn't say. Diyama Reb Shimon ben Lakish v'chein Tana Mishmei de Reb Yossi Reish Lakish, and it's also taught in the name of Reb Yossi in a Tanaic source, La'olam al yiftach piv Adam la Satan. Literally, a person should not open his mouth up in the presence of the Satan. In other words, not to prompt the Satan. The Satan is an entity that we associate also with the Malach HaMoves, with the angel of death. So don't prompt him by saying that many will die, many will drink the elixir of death. You're baiting him, so to speak. It's not a good thing to do. Omer Rav Yosef Ma'ikra, and Rav Yosef says what pasuk indicates this. So when the pasuk says, "Kistoim hoyinu la'amoro diminu," the prophet is saying, we, on the Jewish people, we have been like Sodom and Amorah. In other words, it's a degrading description of the people, to be compared to Sodom and Amorah. Maya Haderland. What do we find? What response do we find in the prophet? Shimu Davar Hashem Katzine Sodom. After you called yourself Sodom, that in fact was how you were then viewed from above, as Sodom. So one should not open his mouth and speak ill, which you can see leads to, in fact, that which is negative. So on the same, along the same lines, to make reference to death that has taken place in the past, okay, that's a fact. But to speak about upcoming death, that's not advisable. Omerle kum emo milsa keneged menachme avelim. Say something in honor of the community that comes to console the mourners. Posach v'yomar, and again a bracha is featured over here. You see 3 lines later a bracha. So he says as follows: Ochenu gomle chasodim b'nei gomle chasodim. My brothers, or our brothers, that do acts of loving kindness, who are the descendants of those that did thusly. Hamachzikim b'brisa shel Avraham Avinu, that continue the covenant of Avraham. Ochenu Baal hagmul yishan lechem gmulchem. Let the one in charge of reward give you your due reward. Baruch atah Hashem Meshalem hagmul. Blessed be the Almighty who pays due reward to those that deserve it. Omerle kum emo milsa keneged kol Yisrael. Say something in honor of the Jewish people. Posach v'yomar Riboin ha'olamim Padei v'atzel malei hosha amcho Yisrael. A series of verbs that indicate salvation. Save your nation of Israel. Min hadever, min acherv, min abizo, min ashidofim, min yirakon. From all kinds of trials and tribulations, from the plague, from death, from plunder, from crop blast, from mildew, when we call mine puronis hamisrakshis avois la'olam, and from all other kinds of oppressive fates that come and visit the world. Terem nikra v'ato taneh. Even before we call out, answer, respond to us. Baruch atov oitzer hamagefa. Blessed be the Almighty who restrains the plague. Omar ula v'amri la b'masni satana. Now we should point out that up till this point, then we've seen a series of brachos from triangles 2, 3, 4, and 5. A series of brachos that would be recited and the house of mourners. Before we can continue in the Gemara itself, though, we should glance at the side. The topic heading, Takonas Eser Kaisis Beveis Havel, the establishment of drinking 10 cups, where the mourner is assigned 10 cups. And Rashi says, Laharbus lo bishtia, they should drink a lot of wine. So there are 10 cups that are referred to. Ula, and some versions have a b'masisa tana that this is taught in a Tanaic source. Asora kaisis tiknu chachomim bebeis havel. The chachomim, the sages, established that there should be 10 cups of wine drunk in the house of mourning. Shlosha kodim achila, 3 before the meal. That the mourners, possibly all the people, would drink 3 cups of wine before the meal, kedei liftach es b'nei me'av, so as to literally open his alimentary canal to increase his appetite level. Shlosha b'soch achila kedei lishos achila shebeme'av, 3 cups of wine in the middle of the meal, so that as a person is eating, the food that's in his stomach becomes saturated with the wine. That's according to the Gemara, is viewed as something that's helpful or beneficial. V'arba li'achar achila, and 4 additional cups after the meal. And these 4 cups are echad keneged hazon, ve'echad keneged birchas. One is in honor of the first of the 4 brachas of the birchas hamazon. And Rashi says, echad keneged hazon, al kol bracha shoyse hakos u'moizgim lo acher. On each bracha, he would drink a cup, and then another, and then it was filled up again. Now, it would on a superficial level, it would appear not that he's drinking this in the middle of the birchas hamazon, but each cup represented a bracha. So for each bracha, there was a separate cup, and it doesn't mean that they lined up 4 cups, but rather he would drink the cup, and then it would be refilled. And the echad keneged birchas haaretz, that's this. The birchas is the second bracha of the birchas hamazon. The echad keneged bnei Yerushalayim. The echad keneged hatoiv hametiv. And 3rd cup and 4th cup are in honor of, or established in honor of the 3rd and 4th brachas of the birchas hamazon. Hosifu alein arba'ah. There was a point in time that they added 4 more cups. Echad keneged chazonei ha'ir. One of these additional 4 cups is in honor of the communal leaders, the chazonei ha'ir. Rashi explains these are people that were functionaries in the city to oversee the burial of the dead and other public matters. They were public functionaries. The echad keneged parnosir, and the second of the 4 additional cups referred to are keneged the rich men of the city that used to invest money or pay for the burial of the dead that were indigent. The echad keneged beis hamikdash. The echad keneged Rabban Gamliel. A 3rd cup in honor of the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi says, "Keneged Beis Hamikdash tiknu olav birchas nichumen." Regarding the Beis Hamikdash, a cup of wine, a cup of consolation. Sheye nachamenu hamokom bevinyonoi me'avelenu she'onu misablim olav ke'al meis. We mourn the Beis Hamikdash like we mourn the death of a person. What's fascinating here, it's a thought that just occurred to me now, and this is just to tie into the Gemara that we learned in our previous shiur, that in the Birchas Chasanim, we have the 4th bracha, a bracha in honor of Yerushalayim. We don't want to have a situation of rejoicing and leaving Jerusalem out of our joy. And almost in comparison, if you want to say in contrast, you have in the situation of mourning the opposite of rejoicing. In the situation of mourning, personal mourning, even there, we don't leave Jerusalem out of that. And hence we have a cup of wine that is... I should add, Rashi points out, I didn't mention this before, Tiknul of Birchas Nichumin. There's a bracha that is established over this cup of wine, a bracha that reflects our desire for the Beis HaMikdash to be rebuilt, and that will comfort us, just like the mourner is consoled over the loss of his beloved. We need to be consoled for the absence of the Beis HaMikdash through its rebuilding. And then a reference was made to a fourth cup of wine in honor of Rabban Gamliel. That will be explained later. Hischilu, the Gemara continues 4 lines from the bottom. Hischilu hoyu shoysin mishtakrin. They started drinking, and you have now 14 cups of wine. And they would drink and become inebriated. Hichziru hadover liyoshna. They restored it to the original 10 cups, as if like 10 cups is a lot of wine, but it's not enough to create intoxication. But going up to 14, that was already too much. So they restored it, they knocked it back down to 10. My Rabban Gamliel, what's the reference to Rabban Gamliel? How does he figure here in the context of the house of the bereaved? On the side of the Gemara we have a nosei topic heading where we've written Shloisha Shlovim. There are 3 stages Be'inyan hahotzos regarding expenditures, v'hayoker, and the expense, akshuros l'kvuras hameis, expenditures and expenses that are associated with the burial of the dead. So you have 3 stages, and that is now in the source. We asked, my Rav Gamliel Desanya, you will see his significance in the following source. Barishona hoysa hoitzas hameis kosher l'kroivav yoser mimisaso. Once upon a time, the hoitzas hameis means the expenditures for burying the dead were so great. Rashi says that they had clothed the corpse in such expensive clothing. It's almost reminiscent of some images that many of us might have of the dead being buried in tuxedos. Tuxedos being associated with very expensive type clothing. So there's if that strikes some people as I don't know, eyebrow raising, that people would bury their beloved in tuxedos, there's actually a historical precedent for that. And that costs so much that the expenditures and the sadness associated with spending so much money over the burial was more difficult to deal with than the actual death itself of their beloved. And you know, look what effect this had on people. They would take the corpse, leave the corpse somewhere in the street, and run away. Until Rav Gamliel, who was the leader of the Jewish people of his time, he was the Nasi of the Jewish leader, and he was. We know that the leader is also expected to be a wealthy man, so we can assume that Rav Gamliel was not only a leader but a man of great opulence. V'noha kalis ba'atzmo, and he conducted himself in a very light, cheap manner. In other words, he left instructions, and he left instructions that he shall be carried out to be buried in mere linens. We'll just assume that Klei Pishton, relative to what was taking place before, this was very cheap. V'noagu kolam achrov lahoitzi b'klei Pishton. And as a result of Rav Gamliel setting the standard, that influenced the rest of the community. Likewise, no more tuxedos. And from that point on, they would bury in Klei Pishton, in mere linens. Omar Rav Papa v'idna. Here's a third stage. Rav Papa says, and nowadays Rav Papa was many years after Rav Gamliel. He says, no galmo afilu b'tzarda bar zuzah. That nowadays we will bury people in this kind of material. Rashi says beged canvas. If canvas is like canvas, so be it. Sheinu shavel a dinar. The cost of it is a dinar, which, relatively speaking, is a very small amount of very, very inexpensive material, very cheap material, probably much less expensive than even the linens referred to in the source. So that you see the significance of Rav Gamliel and his connection to the whole issue of the burial of the dead, and hence, in his honor, they originally had thought to establish an additional cup of wine. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.